What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. We are going to be ranking some of the best prospects in the UFC. I'm going to do men's prospects for today. I have like over 35 here. There should be more, but I had to remove them because I think the C column was just getting so overfilled that I couldn't include more. And I was like, all right, it's time to stop this one. If you're thinking I didn't include a prospect, I probably had him in there and ended up taking him out. I would read out a list of prospects I did take out, but just in your mind, figure if he's not in there, I took him out for a reason. For example, I think I took out a Basharat brother. I like Javid better than Farid. I think he's a little bit more skilled, so I just went with his brother. I put both of the Bonfim brothers in this one, so I guess there's that. But like a Prado, a Bedoya that made his debut. Let me see, Esteban Ribovics. I didn't put him in here. Couldn't really fit him in there. Jack Jenkins, couldn't really put him in here either. I put guys that normally just have a little bit more name value, so just to make this video a little bit more interesting. So let's get right into it. We have over 35. I am going to basically discuss why I put them in their specific spot, but it's going to be a little bit more fast-paced because I'll be here forever talking about some of these prospects. So starting off, why don't we go with the top of B tier? I'm putting Movsar Evloev. It will kind of make sense a little bit later on. I think Evloev definitely has a chance to get into the top 5 at this point at featherweight, but I think some of the top 5 guys have a really good shot at beating him. So kind of think of B tier as top 10, maybe right outside the top 10, and maybe top 5. A tier is like, okay, I think these guys are going to be top 5 at some point, and how good of a prospect they are. B tier, probably be top 10, maybe a little bit outside top 10 within the top 5 region also. I think it's just more of a unknown in that area. So Evloev, I think is a very good fighter. He's, of course, very good wrestling, is developing the stand-up a little bit more. You kind of seen that a little bit more in his fights. I think he's only like 29 years of age, so he is going to get better and better. But as of right now, I'm putting him at the top of B tier. He can definitely move up to the top 5 at some point, but I think some of the top guys in the featherweight division definitely do pretty well, like Ortega. Although he could get out-wrestled and maybe a little bit outstruck in that matchup, I think the jiu-jitsu would probably be a little bit of a problem for Evloev, especially after the Diego Lopez matchup. So there's a little bit of an example there. I guess Emmett is kind of retiring soon, so there's another spot opening. But like a Holloway, a Volkanovski, I think they do really well against a Cater, I think, might actually do pretty well against Evloev. I actually kind of want to see that matchup. But moving on here, why don't we go top of A tier? I'm putting Arman Tsarukyan. I think it would kind of make sense having all these other guys on here, but I think outside of my S tier prospect, which is only one guy, I think he's the next guy there. I think he's getting a top 5 opponent next in Benil Dariush. Arman Tsarukyan has basically showed everything. Like his stand-up hasn't developed the way you kind of want him to, but he's still extremely young, and the fact that he's so high up in that division already and so skilled already, I think is a testament of how good he is. Of course, good wrestling. You can see more of the ground control kind of getting a little bit better there. He is developing a little bit more, so he's still a little bit greener, but as you see him fully develop in like his actual prime, I think he's going to be one of the best guys in that division. So I'm going to put him at 8 tier. I think a lot of people will agree on that one for sure at this point. Why don't we go down to, I did A tier, I did B tier. Why don't we go C tier? I put Cameron Simon. I think he's actually really, really good. Every time I watch him fight, it's a very entertaining fight. Very good on the feet, very good on the ground. I was actually thinking about moving up to B tier, especially with how big C tier was. But Cameron Simon is definitely a guy to watch out for in that division. And I think the flyweight division has looked pretty good in all of his fights. I think his first couple fights, he kind of got in a rough area with the fouls and everything, but his last fight against Terrence Mitchell, absolute dominant wrestling or grappling game. I believe it ended up getting the submission as well. So Cameron Simon has looked absolutely incredible in the UFC. Hopefully he keeps doing well. I think he has a style and he has the skills to make it pretty far in that division. So that's why I have him at the top of C tier. Moving on, because we have a lot of C tier, why don't we go Jonathan Pierce? Jonathan Pierce isn't talked about very much because he hasn't fought in a while. I think he was supposed to fight Bryce Mitchell recently. Jonathan Pierce, I think, in the UFC has lost to Joe Lozon by KO, but after that, won quite a few matches in a row and has actually looked pretty good. And I think he's kind of a guy that's going to be right outside the top 15, or at least I won't say right outside the top 15, but I think your 13, 14, 15, I think is where he's probably going to be at. I think some of the higher level guys will probably give him some issues, but I think he's a very good fighter. I think he definitely makes it a little bit within the top 15 at some point in his career. But again, he is getting older. I think he's 31 years of age, and the fact that he hasn't fought in a while is kind of concerning. So I'm going to put it like that for Jonathan Pierce. I think he's a good fighter, but I really would like to see him fight more, in my opinion. Moving on, why don't we go C-tier again? I'm going Kyle Bahayo, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that he's in the middleweight division. Middleweights are not that good. I mean, once you get a middleweight prospect, you kind of just you hope that he's very good, because it seems like whenever we get a prospect at middleweight, they kind of just sink a little bit more. Kyle Bahayo looked good against Petrosian, even though Petrosian didn't really have that good of a ground game. But against Makhmudmuradov, a little bit more of a competitive matchup, ended up winning that one. And Muradov is actually a really good fighter, good on the feet, and decent on the ground, but Bahayo wasn't really able to establish too much on the ground in that matchup. But he did look good. I think he does make it into the top 15 at some point into his career, but I don't know if I see him as a top 5, top 10 guy at all. So maybe he can develop at some point, but he has been winning his fights, so I guess that's a good start. But I don't see him inside the top 10. Maybe he barely gets within the top 10 in his career, but again, he's still a relatively young guy as well. So let's move on. B tier, I'm going Anthony Hernandez. I think he's really, really good fighter. I'll actually put Brendan Allen here because I think they're on a similar way in the middleweight division. I think they're both pretty underrated in that one. Brendan Allen especially has looked really well. I think the only reason why I'm putting Anthony Hernandez at this point ahead of Brendan Allen is because I believe they fought and Hernandez did beat him on the regional scene before they both went to the UFC. So that's why I'm putting Anthony Hernandez above Brendan Allen. They're both very good prospects. I think Hernandez is a very fun fight style that I like watching. The same thing with Brendan Allen. Both very fun guys to watch, especially in the middleweight division, where I think they can probably move up quite a bit in that division, top 15. I think Brendan Allen just beat Muniz the fight before and then beat Bruno Silva on short notice. So he's getting ranked guys now. Hernandez isn't necessarily there yet, so maybe it's going to be a little bit more time. That's probably the only reason why I'm putting Hernandez above Allen in this case, because he does have a win over him. So let's move on. Why don't we go another fighter in A tier? Oh, this one's going to be interesting. I think we might see some comments about this one. I'm putting Jack Della Maddalena at number 2 in A tier, right behind Arman Tsarukyan. I think Jack Della Maddalena, I'm a fan of Jack Della Maddalena. I don't think I'm biased in saying this because all the other prospects here, I don't know if they're necessarily there with a Jack Della Maddalena yet, but the Basil Hafez fight, 2 weight cuts in 7 days. I mean, the only reason why that fight was close is because Jack Della Maddalena was making mistakes of his own, and he's still extremely young and has looked extremely good on the feet, knows kind of what he's doing on the ground. He looked really tired in that Basil Hafez fight, but he was pulling guillotines, and you don't really see that from a guy in Jack Della Maddalena who actually has really good takedown defense. I guess Ramazan Amib, he kind of made a mistake that kind of got him caught in the choke and ended up getting out of it eventually, but I think Jack Della Maddalena is one of the best guys at welterweight, and I think he just, I don't want to say he needs time, but I think as he gets older, he's going to develop in an absolute monster, and I think the new wave of welterweights coming up there are going to be very entertaining and very skilled, and it's going to be a very fun division to watch. So I think Jack Della Maddalena is that guy at welterweight. There's another guy there that I'll talk about later on in this video, but Jack Della Maddalena, I'm still on the little bit of a hype train there. I think he beats a lot of the guys at welterweight. So let's move on. Why don't we go C tier? I'm going Steve Erceg. I don't know much about Steve Erceg. I was thinking about actually picking him against David Dvorak, and he ended up winning. So looked good against David Dvorak on short notice. There isn't too much to say there. He's a good flyweight prospect. I don't know if I want to put my eggs in. Actually, that would have sounded really weird if I said eggs in his basket, but I'm not going to go all in on Steve Erceg as a super good prospect, but coming into that fight, he did show some really good tape on the regional scene, and I think he can develop a little bit more in the UFC and become a really good flyweight, and he's already beaten more ranked flyweights than a Makayev and a Tatu Atera, and those are 2 really big flyweight prospects, so I'm going Steve Urseg right behind Kyle Bahayo. I kind of want to see a little bit more from Urseg before I do anything in the fact of like moving him up. So why don't we move on here? Why don't we do another C tier? I have a lot of C tiers. I'm going Javid Bashrai. He's shown quite a bit of skill in his last few matchups. I wish there was a little bit more finishes. It seems like he's taking a lot of these guys to decisions. He did look really good in his last fight against Mendoka. Took him down. Did kind of get hit a little bit on the feet, but again, him and his brother are very skilled fighters. I think he is a little bit better than his brother. I think he's a little bit, I don't want to say thicker, but his brother seems to be a little bit more leaned out, and then Javid seems to look like he has a little bit more size on him, and he wasn't put in as bad situations as his brother was against like a Blackshear, where Blackshear was landing some really good shots and took him down and kind of had a little bit of control over him. But Javid, you never really see that with him. He's a very good fighter. He does get hit a little bit, but I think the size, especially at bantamweight, I think he'll do a little bit better than his brother in that division. So I'm putting him right behind Steve Urseg. Steve Urseg has a ranked win, so that's why I kind of rate that a little bit more there. But I'm putting Javid right behind Steve Urseg. Let's move on. Why don't we do another C tier, and then I'll move on after this one. We'll go Diego Lopez right behind Javid Bashrai. Lopez made his debut against Movsar Evloev on short notice. Had Evloev in some really bad situations. Possibly if anybody else was in those situations, probably would have tapped out and he would have won that fight. So Diego Lopez looked incredible on a short notice debut. Recently got a win over Gavin Tucker by triangle. He basically shot in for a takedown and immediately got the triangle in, or it was at least working on it for a little bit. So Diego Lopez looks really good. I want to see him get a little bit more fights. He has a lot of hype around him right now because of that fight against Movsar Evloev. So keep an eye out on Diego Lopez. He has lost a little bit on the regional scene there, but we'll see how he does in the UFC. Let's move on. He does coach quite a bit of the guys fighting in the UFC, like your Moreno, Aldana, I believe I saw him coaching. I want to say Grasso too, but I'm not too sure about that, but you'll see him everywhere. He's a really good jiu-jitsu guy. They like having him in his corner. So let's move on. Why don't we go B tier? I'm going Mike Malott. Mike Malott, Canadian Michael Chandler, Canada's biggest star. I don't know what's that saying about the Canadian fighters at this point, but Mike Malott, very good on the feet, very good on the ground. Can be a little bit sloppy. He looked kind of sloppy in his last fight, but at certain points, obviously, he has like weird power in his hands where it doesn't look like he's throwing too hard, but he's landing hard and he hurts a lot of these guys. So Mike Malott, I think, is definitely got to keep an eye out for. I think he's like 30 or 31 years old. And again, I'll mention this a lot in my videos. I'll mention it like so much. I don't know if I'm annoying people, but welterweights are starting to shift a little more. Like you'll see like the rankings will start to move. You have your Colby Covington, who's getting older, Kamaru Usman getting older, Burns getting older, Wonder Boy's getting older, Neil Magny older, Khamzat Chimaev just moved, Kevin Holland talked about moving, so that's about 7 guys just off the top of my head. Chiesa is getting older, so you're going to have about 8 guys shuffling out of that division within the next couple of years. So you'll have a lot of welterweights coming up, and I think for sure Mike Malott is definitely going to work his way up to welterweight. Probably in the top 10 is where I see him. He's very skilled on the feet, very skilled on the ground, and I think he can hold his own with some of these welterweights. So that's why I'm going to put Mike Malott at B tier right behind Brendan Allen, because Brendan Allen's at middleweight. He's probably going to advance a little bit sooner, and he's already fighting ranked guys. So that's why I'm putting Mike Malott behind Brendan Allen there. Why don't we move on to B tier? I'm going Gabriel Bonfim behind Mike Malott. A lot of people were behind Ismail Bonfim when he KO'd Terrence McKinney, but Gabriel Bonfim, like on the Contender Series, I figured he was going to be the bigger prospect, and you kind of saw that a little bit more when Ismail Bonfim lost to Benoit Saint Denis, especially after getting that big KO. A lot of people were on him. But I was still like, I think Gabriel Bonfim is a little bit more athletic. He's younger, even though Ismail Bonfim is like 27, 28, and Gabriel Bonfim is like 25, 26. I saw a little bit more of athleticism in Gabriel Bonfim. It is at welterweight, so it's up a division. I don't think there's going to be as much talent as there would be at like a lightweight currently, because lightweights there's a lot of really good lightweights, especially in the top 15, top 20. Welterweight, you can kind of find some of these guys that aren't wrestlers, that aren't big grapplers, and Gabriel Bonfim showed all the skill on the feet, showed all the skill on the ground. He's a little bit sloppier with his hands, but he'll start to figure that out as he gets older. He'll kind of hone in his craft a little bit more. I think Gabriel Bonfim is a future top 5, top 7 welterweight, especially when he starts to hit his prime. I think he's going to be very good in that division. Very athletic dude. I think he needs to slow down a little bit more. I don't know if Neil Magny's the guy yet. I think he needs to get an unranked guy and a guy that's like top 17, top 15, and then kind of work his way up a little bit more, because I think he can get beat up, especially early on in his career, if he takes one of those higher level welterweights at this point. So I think they need to slow roam a little bit more here, but I think he's definitely a prospect to watch out for in the UFC. Why don't we go D tier? I don't know if I'm hating here, but Muhammad Usman, I am just not a fan of. He's 35 years of age at heavyweight. I think he's 35. He's an older dude at heavyweight. He's not that good on the feet. I guess he has power, but he'll get beat on the feet by, I think, all top 15 heavyweights. He has the wrestling that he can rely on it, but if you can defend a takedown, you're literally going to finish this guy. I don't know. I'm not behind Usman at all. We'll see what happens, but I don't think he's that good of a fighter. We'll see, though. I don't have much to talk about other than that, so let's move on. Why don't we go another C tier? I'm going Tatsuro Taira behind Diego Lopez, and I'm going to put him in a group with Muhammad Mokaev, and I think I will explain this one very clearly so people will understand this one, because I know a lot of people are really behind Muhammad Mokaev. I haven't been impressed since his Durden fight, I'm going to be completely honest, and it feels like Tatsuro Taira, even though he had a very close fight in his last matchup where it showed him getting knocked down a couple times, and he kind of just eked it out a little bit more. Arguably could have lost that fight, but he did show some really good grappling in that one. But again, I think even in my prospect spotlight video, I said that Taira needs to work on his stand-up a little bit more, and I hopefully he starts to develop it a little bit more. I think both of these guys are taking on ranked flyweights now, which is really good to see. I think the order of these guys will probably move depending on how they do in that matchup. I think Mokaev is taking on Tim Elliott. I don't think I'm wrong there. He is taking on Tim Elliott. And then Tatsuro Taira is taking on David Dvorak. So maybe David Dvorak moved out of the top 15, but he's recently a very high-level flyweight. So I think that's a good matchup for Taira. I think that's a good matchup for Mokaev. I like them both. We'll get to see him against higher-ranked competition. So that's why I wanted out of both of them, to be completely honest. So I'm happy those matchups got made. Let's move on. Why don't we go... Why don't we go B tier again, and I'll return to A tier. I'm going Joe Anderson Brito. I think he's a very good fighter, has really good power in his hands, shows a little bit more a technical aspect to his game than you see a lot of these jiu-jitsu guys, but he has really good jiu-jitsu, good power in his hands, good technique as well. Beat Chepe Mariscal, and Mariscal just made his debut and kind of just beat the crap out of, Trevor Peek. So I guess Trevor Peek isn't the most technical guy, but he's a guy that'll go into war. I don't know why I brought up Trevor Peek. He's not the most technical guy. I like watching him, but Joe Anderson Brito looked pretty good, especially in all of his UFC matchups. Joe Anderson Brito, I think, has only lost one fight, and that was against Bill Algeo, who I think Bill Algeo is actually pretty good as well as like an unranked fighter. But I think Joe Anderson Brito, good power in his hand, good technique, good jiu-jitsu. He's a very good fighter, a guy to watch out for. I don't know if he'll make it far into the top 15 in general, but I do think he makes the top 15. Possibly he makes it a little bit further up. He's a little bit underrated for that division as well. So we'll see how this one goes. I do think Joe Anderson Brito definitely has a future in the UFC at the top part of the ranks. So moving on, why don't we go? Actually, I just showed it. Michael Morales. I said I was going to do an A tier, but I'll do that next. Michael Morales. Another prospect coming up in the UFC. I kind of want to see a little bit more of him. He does have some decent wrestling, does have some good takedown defense, has good striking. He does rely on his boxing a little bit too much. He's like such a really good athlete and still very young, of course. I wish he used a little bit more of his tools on his offense, like more kicks. I think because he has some really good length, especially, and pretty long legs especially. I think he can really use his legs quite a bit, like use a lot more leg kicks, go to the body a little bit more. I think just change it up other than just the boxing that he does use, because he does, and it has at least recently against Max Griffin. He was getting hit quite a bit on the feet early on in that fight until he started adjusting and looking a lot better in that matchup. So I think Michael Morales needs to develop a little bit more on the feet. Of course, can rely on that wrestling, good takedown defense. So I think he can hang in there with some of the top welterweights, especially when he gets a little bit older. But I think as of right now, he's definitely got a really good future ahead of him. Hopefully he develops as he should and gets a little bit better there. But I'm putting him behind Joe Anderson Brito. I think Brito has a little bit more figured out than Michael Morales, and same thing with Gabriel Bonfim. I think Bonfim has all the skills there. Just needs to hone it in a little bit more on the feet, but it is working for him. So moving on, I'm going to go A tier, Umar Nurmagomedov. I don't know if I'm jumping a gun here, but he is the 11th ranked guy. Only beat Raoni Barcelos by KO is like his most notable win. So, I mean, he has the striking. His striking's getting better. He's really good on the ground, of course, and he's still very young. So that's why I'm putting him right under Jack Della Maddalena there. He was supposed to fight Corey Sandhagen, or some people thought he was going to beat Corey Sandhagen, and maybe he doesn't. I think it probably wouldn't have been a bad prediction for sure picking Umar against Sandhagen, but I think a lot of people were actually going to pick Sandhagen. So, and I wouldn't have minded Sandhagen beating Umar, but Umar is still very young. I think he can develop and probably to like a top 5 guy eventually in that bantamweight division. So that's why I'm putting Umar there. Nothing really to be said. I do think the guys ahead of him are probably a little bit further in their careers than an Umar Nurmagomedov at this point, so that's why I'm putting them in their respective spots. So why don't we go C tier with Joe Pyfer. I think Joe Pyfer, good wrestler, showed some good grappling. I think he beat who is it, GM3 in grappling, and then beat him in MMA as well. So he hasn't fought the best competition yet. GM3 is actually a very solid fighter, so I guess that's a pretty good win to have, but isn't the most like a reliable guy you can depend on for. I don't even know. GM3 is a very weird fight. I don't even know how to talk about it, because I guess it's a good win, but it's also like, I don't want to even call it a bad win, because GM3, I don't know. GM3 is a weird fighter. I'm not going to get into it too much, but some fights he looks really great, and some fights he just hums out one punch KO, or Joe Pyfer just hurts him immediately and finishes him up on the ground. So I don't know. I think Joe Pyfer's a very good fighter. He got that bad injury on Dana White's Contender Series against Justin Stoltzfus. I think he can be pretty good in the UFC, maybe top 15 middleweight at some point. But again, I'm putting him a little bit farther down in C tier because I just don't know about him against the higher level competition. So that's where I'm putting Joe Pyfer in this one. Why don't we move on to A tier? I'm putting Ian Garry. I'm gonna put Ian Garry right behind Umar Nurmagomedov. Ian Garry has looked incredible on the feet, has really good takedown defense as well. So maybe he's not gonna get put in bad positions like a Jack Della Maddalena. But Ian Garry, I'm a little bit worried about his chin, especially when it gets higher up in the welterweight division. Jeff Neal, I was a little bit worried would be a very tough matchup for Ian Garry, because Ian Garry got hit with one punch with Kenan Song and got almost like laid out cold. So I think Jeff Neal probably would have been able to catch Ian Garry at some point in that matchup. But again, Ian Garry, incredible on the feet, uses his distance pretty well. You even saw after him getting knocked down against Kenan Song, him coming back and just like his head movement was there. He's able to maintain a really good distance and was just landing crazy shots on Kenan Song and looked super good in that fight. So I think Ian Garry's a very good fighter. Again, super young, especially. I'm telling you, these welterweights are crazy, these welterweight prospects. But I think Ian Garry under Umar Nurmagomedov isn't necessarily bad. I think maybe the next one might be able to be debatable between Ian Garry and him. I might move that one a little bit, but let's get right to the next one. Why don't we go D tier? I'm putting Christian Leroy Duncan. He honestly, if anything, he probably belongs up here, but I need to fill up D tier. I'm going to be completely honest. I like Christian Leroy Duncan. He's a very good prospect, a very good athlete, but his last fight where he was just mindlessly throwing kicks and shit, like that's just not going to work in the UFC. I don't know what he was thinking. And he's a middleweight prospect. This is what I'm telling you. Some of these middleweight prospects are just not good, even though they're incredible athletes. So Christian Leroy Duncan needs to figure it out a little bit more. I still think he's a very good prospect. He's probably a very good, he is a very good athlete. And I think he can do very well in the UFC. I think he's still relatively young as well. So hopefully he figures everything out there, but he just needs to be a little bit smarter on the feet, in my opinion. So let's move on to another C tier. I'm putting Ismail Bonfim under Joe Pyfer. Ismail Bonfim kind of showed in his last matchup against Benoit Saint Denis that maybe there's a little bit cap to him. I don't know. It was kind of a a weird fight in general because Benoit Saint Denis kind of came out there and just went heavy with the body kicks immediately. So you kind of didn't really get to see Ismail stand in the fight, kind of the get adjusted to the fight, I guess. So it was a little bit of an earlier fight stoppage. So I won't go too much on Ismail Bonfim there, but Ismail Bonfim has all the skills in the world, but in a very tough lightweight division. Maybe he's the number 15th guy, maybe the number 14th guy, maybe the number 13th guy at some point, but I don't see him being in the top 10 like his brother eventually in his career. So I am going to put Ismail Bonfim under Joe Piper, and I think Joe Piper has a really good shot at making at least a decent run at middleweight, because some older guys at middleweight as well, like how long do we see Costa staying in the UFC? How long do we see Brunson taking up a spot there? Cannonier's an older guy as well, so you're seeing some of these older guys in the middleweight division. We'll see how the division cycles through, but I think for sure Joe Piper might have a really solid chance at moving up there. He has the tools. We'll see what happens there. The UFC seems to be behind him as well, so I'm putting him ahead of Ismail Bonfim in this one. Why don't we go... Okay, why don't we go B tier? I'm putting Elvis Brenner. I didn't know where to put Elvis Brenner here because he went to a split decision with Zubaira Tukhugov and then finished Guram Kutaladze. And let me just make this clear. Guram Kutaladze went to split decisions with Mateus Gamrot and went to split decisions with Damir Ismagulov. Top 15 lightweights there. I believe Gamrot's number 6, number 7 in the lightweight division, and they couldn't finish Guram Kutaladze. So that kind of says a little bit more about Elvis Brenner. I don't know where he's at because it's hard to go from a split decision to Zubaira Tukhugov, who I don't even think is in the UFC anymore, to finishing Guram Kutaladze. So I'm putting him under Michael Morales. I guess we'll kind of just see how he does. I don't know. That's a big question mark for me. I might move. We'll get there and I'll talk about it. But next up, I'm going to go Vitor Petrino behind Ismail Bonfim. Vitor Petrino, a very good athlete, really good power in his hands, really good stand-up. He's developing his wrestling a little bit more, and his grappling is getting a little bit better as well. You can kind of see that he's super young as well for the light heavyweight division. I think he has a chance to be very good in that division as well. But Vitor Petrino kind of he does seem a little chinny, but I don't know if he's doing the right things fight IQ-wise in his fights. And he's still very young, but it seems like whenever he hurts these guys on the feet at this point in the UFC in his last couple of matchups, he goes for takedowns and establishes control there. So I don't know if he's not willing to take too much risk on the feet. I guess he hurt Anton Turkalj, and Turkalj kind of cheated, and Mark Smith allowed it the whole entire fight, which kind of pissed me off watching it. And I still remember it for that reason, but I think Petrino is a very good prospect. I think I need to see a little bit more from him. It seems like if you take a really good light heavyweight fighter, top 15 guy, I think they'll do really well against Petrino. Well, I won't say very well against Petrino, but I think they would beat Petrino, especially at this point in his career. So if he develops a little bit more and gets a little bit better there, I think he can possibly be a top 10 light heavyweight, especially further down in his career. But I'm putting him at the lower end of C tier. Still not too sure on him, but I do think he eventually will be a pretty good prospect in the UFC. Why don't I go D tier for Terrence McKinney? I like Terrence McKinney, but he's fighting Mike Breeden at this point, and it does seem like he might get cut if he does lose that fight, I guess. Mike Breeden, like, how much lower does it get under Mike Breeden? Maybe he gets one more fight after that. He's taking on short notice, but he should win that fight. If he doesn't, I don't know how much longer he's going to be in the UFC. A very explosive guy, good wrestling. Just got submitted by Nazem Sadikov. So I don't know where to put Terrence McKinney. Beat Matt Frivola, which is a pretty good win to have. Made it rock Drew Dober on short notice there. So has had some really good moments in these fights. Terrence McKinney, good moments in his career, but recently has not been looking that good. After the KO against Ismail Bonfim, that looked brutal. Lost to Nazem Sadikov, kind of got his hand like pinned back and choked out, and now taking a short notice fight against Mike Breeden. We'll see how that fight goes. He should beat him. If he doesn't, I don't know about Terrence McKinney anymore. You know, it would be a very rough fall if he did lose to Mike Breeden. Hopefully he doesn't, because I think there is some star power behind Terrence McKinney. So it'd be better for the UFC if he stayed in the UFC for sure. So why don't we move on here? I'm going Jilton Almeida at A tier, and I think I can't remember. Is he in the top 5? Maybe he's like 6, 7, or 8. Jailton Almeida is a very good wrestler, but I feel like the top 5 at heavyweight, disregarding Cyril Gahn because he can't wrestle, I feel like they do really well against Jailton Almeida. You kind of don't really see the stand-up game of Jailton Almeida too much, and I think there's a reason for that, is my guess. I'm sure he has quite a bit of power, and he's just a freak, like an athletic freak. I mean, he's a massive dude, especially for being that light. Picking up some of these guys and slamming them on the ground is very, very impressive. But Jailton Almeida, I think against a good striker, I think against Curtis Blades, which I think this matchup is actually happening, might struggle a little bit more because Curtis Blades has a really good wrestling base as well and is pretty good on the feet. So I think Curtis Blades would do pretty well against Jailton Almeida. I don't know. I just don't see much as a top 5 guy, as a future title contender in Jailton Almeida as maybe other people do think. He's a very fun fighter to watch. He kind of just dominates these guys on the ground. And maybe Ian Garry might go behind Jailton Almeida at this point because Jailton Almeida is fighting higher ranked guys. Even though I think Ian Garry does eventually get up there, I think there are some big faults in his game as well. So maybe I put him right behind Jailton Almeida at this point because of just how chinny he is. I think Jeff Neal probably would have done pretty well against a guy like Ian Garry. And the competition at heavyweight from like 5, 6 to 15, or not even to 15, to like the rest of the division isn't that great on a level similar to welterweight. So I'm gonna kind of distance that a little bit more there. If Ian Garry can kind of make it up to the top 5, I think he definitely deserves to be ahead of Jailton Almeida. But at this point, I think Almeida is in front of Ian Garry at this point. But if we're talking at a future level prospects, like prime Ian Garry, how I'd imagine prime Ian Garry will look like with a prime, the best version of Jailton Almeida, I think Ian Garry gets 100% ahead of him. But at this point, as a prospect, I think Ian Garry is right behind Jailton Almeida at this point. So let's move on. Why don't we go B tier? I'm going Hanat Fakhretdinov. I think Hanat has looked good. You haven't seen too much of a stand-up game. I guess he looked pretty good on the feet against Kevin Lee, but it wasn't that long. That fight wasn't that long. Out-wrestled Brian battled. Submitted Kevin Lee. So he's looked pretty good on the ground. Kind of want to see him a little bit more on the feet. Elvis Brenner beat a number 15 guy in Guram Kudalaze, so that's why I'm putting him ahead of Hanat Fakhretdinov, I think is how you say his last name. I can never get it right. Fakhretdinov, I don't know. Maybe I put Renat there and Elvis Brenner kind of spaced out here because I just don't know where to put him. So that's how I'm going to do that one. Why don't we go Brian Battle under Vitor Petrino. I don't know if Brian Battle ever gets ranked at welterweight in the top 15. Maybe he gets number 15, number 14, but he's a very good fighter, very good stand-up, solid on the ground, but kind of just got out-wrestled by Renat Fakhretdinov. Kind of just show that there's a different level at welterweight in the wrestling. And I don't know if I could ever see Brian Battle in the top 10 because of the wrestling that's in welterweight. So I think there's kind of a limit to Brian Battle. I think there's a little bit more potential in a guy like Vitor Petrino and Ismail Bonfim because they're just so skilled on the feet and on the ground to where I can see them moving up a little bit more in those divisions. But welterweight with a lot of wrestlers, I think Brian Battle is going to be fighting them quite a bit. But he has a really good power in his hands, really good on the feet, has KO'd some really decent guys. He KO'd Sato at middleweight, which Sato's not good, but I think Green, tough guy to finish, and he ended up finishing him pretty early. So I think Brian Battle is a very good guy on the feet, but welterweight, just not the right place to have a not so good wrestling. So why don't we go D tier? I'm putting Paddy Pimblett. And now there is one guy after Paddy, which a lot of people may question a little bit more, but you guys will understand when you see him. Paddy Pimblett, I don't even know where to start. Paddy Pimblett is not bad, but the way he looked in the Jared Gordon fight is not what you should look like against Jared Gordon. He did not look good at all. Won by robbery. I don't know. I'm kind of low on Paddy Pimblett. Hopefully they can make that rematch and maybe he can get that one back. If he gets that one back, I think a lot of people will be, I don't want to say on the train of Paddy Pimblett, but I think people will be a little bit more even out on that. I think the rematch should happen. Give Paddy another chance there, or at least give the judges another chance, because Jared Gordon should have won the fight. Maybe we just had a bad run of judges or it was rigged or something. I don't know. But Paddy Pimblett, Just not what I thought he was going to be. I don't think he's better than Terrence McKinney. I don't think he's better on a prospect level than Mo Usman, which is weird to say, or Christian Leroy Duncan, or any of these guys. So that's why I'm putting him down here. There's one guy behind him. So Paddy Pimblett isn't the worst prospect here, but going through, why don't we go C tier? I'm going to Zim Sadikov after Brian Battle. Brian Battle has looked pretty good, and the only guy that kind of dominated him on the ground was Renat Fakhretdinov, and that was kind of, I think, didn't Brian Battle take that one on short notice as well? So there's kind of that there, but Nazim Sadikov did not look that good against Evan Elder. Evan Elder looked really good in that matchup, and speaking of prospects, I forgot to put on here, Evan Elder, probably somewhere in the middle of this C tier list, so, but he wasn't looking that good early on against Evan Elder. Ended up getting a really favorable cut on Evan Elder's head and won the fight that way. So submitted Terrence McKinney, which is pretty impressive, but I kind of want to see a little bit more there. The Evan Elder fight is kind of a rough one to see, or at least is holding me back from pushing him up this list a little bit more. But he's a very technical fighter. He's a Longo guy, trains with Aljamain Sterling, Merab, Matt Frivola. So he has some really good guys in the camp, similar size to him. So he's going to be, I think, a pretty good prospect coming up. We'll just see how he does. So why don't we move on to B tier? I'm going Jack Shore. I don't like his move up to 145, but I think he's a very good fighter. I think he took his first loss to Ricky Simone at 135. But again, very good prospect. I don't like the 145 move. I think he didn't look... He was already not a big muscle guy. When he went up to 145, he looked like he had like another layer of fat on him. And it would just look like... I don't want to call it skinny fat, but it was more of... there was like no muscle definition there, and I didn't really like that. I think he beat Makwan Amirkhani up a division and kind of had a rough first round, which Amirkhani kind of just does. He performs pretty well early on and then gasses out. But I don't know if I like the move up for Jack Shore. Hopefully he moves back down. I thought he had a little bit more success there. Had one against some pretty good opponents until running into Ricky Simone, who's a top 15 guy, top 10 guy in that division, I believe. I think he's 11 or 12 in that division, if I can't remember correctly. Or Umar's number 11 and Ricky Simone somewhere there in the top 15. So I think Jack Shore should move back down. I don't like the 145 move, but we'll see how he does for the rest of his career. I have 2 in A tier, 2 in B tier, 2 in C tier, 1 in D tier, and 1 in S tier. Why don't we finish up D tier here? I'm putting Shandon Ross. I'm not even sure if he's still in the UFC. It'd actually be insane if he's still in the UFC. He just got put out cold by Jesus Aguilar. You kind of saw something coming at this point. He got KO'd by Vinicius Salvador on the Contender Series. Got KO'd by... Who else did he get? He got... I think Clayton Rodriguez KO'd him. I think he did like a hip attack and then just finished him off after that. Finished him relatively early, and then Jesus Aguilar laid him out cold, flatline KO'd him. Very brutal to see, but I mean, his chin was getting rocked around everywhere. It was honestly a surprise that he got a contract anyways. So I don't even know if he's in the UFC. He probably isn't at this point, but moving on. I'm going to put these guys in their own little category and B tier. You have Elvis Brenner, who's kind of an unknown, but can definitely be up here for sure. Then I'm going to put a Narulo Aliyev and a Ikram Aliskerov. I feel like they're kind of in the same pool. I think they both could be very, very good. Aliyev showed some really good and dominant wrestling. Didn't show too great a stand-up against Rafael Alves. And I think Alves is a very good fighter. Alves is decent on the ground. But again, Aliyev, very dominant wrestler. Again, I haven't seen enough on the feet. And you've seen that guys in lightweights, like your Khabib, like, look at him. He looks like freaking Khabib. Let's be real. This is like Khabib Jr. He's probably not even showing up on this side of this page, but that's Khabib Jr. 100%. But I think he can be really good in that division. I kind of want to see what he looks like. It's a much different division than what Khabib was used to. There's a lot more grapplers in there, so I don't know how far he makes it into the lightweight division. He probably makes it to number 10. He makes it in the top 10 in my opinion. But I think some of these guys that are like your Jalen Turners, who are really big dudes, who have really good length, maybe might give him a little bit of problems. You have like your grapplers like Tsarukyan, Makhachev, of course, Gamrot, who's a good grappler, Dariush, Oliveira. Very good grapplers in the lightweight division that could definitely give some trouble to Narulo Aliyev. So I want to see him a little bit more against some higher level competition. I think Rafael Alves is a really good competition, especially debuting in the UFC. But haven't seen too much. Ikram Aliskerov KO'd Phil Hawes. Was going to get a Costa matchup, but I think it's absolutely crazy. I thought Costa was going to beat him. And now he has a fight against Nasruddin Imavov, which I think Imavov has a really good chance against Ikram Aliskerov as well. So that's kind of, I'm going to put them in that little bit of a pool. Ikram Aliskerov definitely has a chance to be really good in the UFC, at least a high-ranked middleweight. I think Ikram has a chance. Nurul Aliyev definitely has a pretty good chance as well. So I'm putting them in their own little area B tier. I want to see a little bit more of them. They've only had one fight, so why don't we move on? We have Jake Hadley. I probably would have ranked him higher if he didn't lose to Cody Durden, but he did have a couple good moments in that matchup. I think it was like 1-1 going into the third. Definitely didn't do enough in the third to win that fight. And Cody Durden is a guy like right outside the top 15, and Makhachev already KO'd Cody Durden, so it made sense. Hadley's a little bit further down, and Makhachev's a little bit further up. Adding another guy who did lose, I'm going to put Ignacio Bahamondes. And maybe I put Bahamondes above. I don't think C-tier is not a bad place to be put at. And I think Hadley's a very good fighter. Probably a good prospect in his own. Just ran into Durden, who I think is a guy he probably should have beat. But Ignacio Bahamondes also lost too. So I think these are both really good prospects though. They're both very good prospects. I don't know where to put them. I think they're both in the same level here. Bahamondes has probably shown more in the UFC at this point. I guess Hadley kind of just went with Nascimento and then got another pretty dominant wrestler in Durden. Well, I won't say dominant because Nascimento was a much bigger guy and he's able to dominate guys using his mass. But Durden's more of a guy that'll push a pace on you. So a little bit different there, but I think I'll leave it at that. I have 2 A tiers and 1 S tier left. So we're down to 3. My second to last A tier here is Carlos Ulberg. I think Ulberg is a very, very good prospect. I think he's pretty underrated. Maybe if he doesn't go at the end of A tier, he probably goes at the top of B tier. I think he's a future top 5 light heavyweight. And now I know we haven't seen too much of him, and there are some really good guys in the top 5 at light heavyweight, but I think for sure there's an opening for him. I think I can definitely see in the future him in the top 5 part of that light heavyweight division. I wish he got a little bit more of ranked opponents. I want to see him against a ranked opponent very soon, but I think he got another unranked opponent. I can't remember exactly who it is, but Carlos Ulberg has all the skills to make it to the top 5 at light heavyweight. Maybe I'm just rating him a little bit too high, but I think he's a very good fighter. Ran into, I think, Kennedy Nzechukwu early on in his career and got that loss, but ever since then has looked really good, and I think he'll do very well in that light heavyweight division. Kind of just ran into Nagumuranu. So why don't we go to Bo Nickal here? I think Bo Nickal, although hasn't fought the level of competition as the majority of these guys, I think, of course, has the athleticism, has the wrestling background, of course, power in his hands. Of course, he just needs to develop, but I think he has the framework in front of him of being a top guy at middleweight. So we'll see how his career goes. We know how the middleweights are in that division, but hopefully we get to see him develop a little bit more. They should slow roll him. Do not throw him up like some of these fans want to see, because let's be real, the prospect of him versus Hamzat is a very fun fight to think about, but it's not going to be as fun if Bo Nickal is not ready for it. So I'm gonna put Bo Nickal right behind Carlos Ulberg. I think Ulberg is going to be there a little bit sooner, and there's still maybe a question or two about Bo Nickal, just a striking a little bit more. He's not the most technical guy. You've really just seen him throw a couple overhands and land some really good shots and KO some of these guys. But again, very good wrestling. Has shown some good grappling. We'll see how he does though in that middleweight division. Again, slow roll him, get him to the top. Why not? He's definitely young enough to where you can slow roll him. So my S tier prospect is Shavkat Rakhmonov. I can see him definitely becoming champion, especially within the next couple of years. I think that, again, that welterweight division is kind of shifting a little bit more, and I think he does pretty well against a guy in Leon Edwards. He's a big guy himself, has good power in his hands. Leon Edwards is a balanced fighter, but I think the same thing with Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think he can do really good against him. Good submission skills, good power in his hands. He doesn't really move his head too much, which is kind of worrying, and I don't think he's as dynamic on the feet as in Leon Edwards with some of the kicks and some of the stuff he does do on the feet. But I think Shavkat Rakhmonov, a guy that I think will for sure win the belt at welterweight, because I don't like within the shift now I don't see anyone else kind of there. Maybe Bilal eventually gets the title, which, I mean, I just don't want to even think about. But Shavkat's there. I can put him in this video because he's outside the top 6 too. But I think he's a future champion. Has all the skills, the submission skills. I think he has gotten a finish in every single one of his fights. Looked good against Jeff Neal. I think he got rocked one point in that one, but stood on the feet with Jeff Neal. Of course, shot a couple takedowns. Jeff Neal stopped him, but looked really good on the feet against Jeff Neal. So I'm putting him there. I think he's a future champion. I think I can say that comfortably compared to everybody else here. Maybe Arman Tsarukyan doesn't become champion. Maybe Jack Della Maddalena doesn't become champion. Maybe Umar, maybe it's a little bit different, but we haven't seen him against the top guys, so I can't even make that question yet. So Jailton Almeida, I haven't seen him developed on the feet as much. Ian Garry, his chin, I don't think his chin will hold up towards the upper part of that division. I can see him getting chinned by some of these better strikers. I can see him getting chinned by Shavkat Rakhmonov. I'm going to be completely honest there. Even though they do train out of the same gym, I'm sure they know who's going to win that fight. I think Shavkat does really well against Carlos Olberg. Maybe at some point he becomes champ, but I think Shavkat's the clear one out of all these guys here, especially at A tier. So Shavkat Rakhmonov is my S tier prospect at this point in the video. Let me know what you guys think about it. On my computer, it says 45 minutes for this video, so hopefully you guys stuck around a little bit, but this video was probably way too long. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think about the video, and I'll see you guys next time.